you know what she said?
Let them eat cake.
He took the bomb.
We're getting screwed, man. Every time we turn around, we're getting screwed. Oh, the revolution's going to be through podcasting for sure. That's the only way we talk. It's the little guys that take the brunt of everything. It's got to stop. Peasants, man. We're just peasants. Every one of us. You watch those old movies and see the peasants in the background with the kings and queens walking around. We're those people. We're those people.
Good morning, peasants. Welcome to another episode of The Peasant's Perspective. You know, we've got this intro-outro thing, and we need to start playing our intros and outros, but we have this really bad copy of it. You got to recognize this thing is multiple years old, and, you know, when the show went underground, a lot of this stuff kind of disappeared as far as like our audio files and clips and stuff like that. Anyways, it's good to be with you again. Mondays are always really hard shows because just so much stuff happened over the weekend. And especially because with Friday being an interview show, we also kind of missed a lot of content on Friday. But that's okay, because guess what? The world just keeps turning. Yeah. And all this stuff was going to happen whether we watched it, read about it, learned about it, or not. Because contrary to what you think, if a tree falls in the woods and you're not around to hear it, it still fell in the woods. Yeah. So
they fall down all the time.
They fall down all the time, and they're always in your way. So, yes, we had a really busy weekend. CPAC was this weekend, and that was kind of a fun one for me to watch because all my buddies were at CPAC this year. Like I said, it was like the universe got a lot smaller in the last year, and that happens anytime you travel, like you meet new contacts, different places and stuff like that. But specifically with me being in like prison, like I didn't just get to know Philly. Like I've never walked the streets of Philly, but I've walked the streets of Philly. You know what I mean? Like I've spent some time with the boys from Philly. So I know a little about Philly. And just being with people from really all over the country. And the thing about prison, I don't know if anybody's ever told you, but you have a lot of time on your hands. And so you spend a lot of time talking with these people and learning about them. But it's been interesting watching the world become very small because as I've dove both feet into political commentary and the journey that took me through, like I've mentioned many times, now I'm watching like my prosecutor on TV. I'm watching the January 6th event be something that's mentioned literally every single day, almost every hour, right? Somewhere, someone's talking about the January 6th Capitol incident. Hopefully we're going to move past the word riot and insurrection.
You're the center of the world, Taylor. Don't let it go to your head.
Yes. You're special, just like everyone else.
Yeah.
So this is Stephen Sun, the Capitol Police Chief on January 6th, and he's at CPAC talking. And the key thing here, and this is the thing that with January 6th, now that we're out, you're going to hear more and more about this entrapment narrative and how that entrapment kind of worked out. And there's lots of different angles to look at this thing. Just like any other big major event, there's not one singular thread that you can pull on to say, oh, if this didn't happen, this didn't happen, this didn't happen. There's lots of moving pieces here. Lots of things had to not happen, in addition to lots of things had to happen in order for January 6th to look the way January 6th looked. So here's Stephen Sun talking at CPAC about the lead up to January 6th.
A lot of people may not realize this. They've heard Donald Trump offered up 20,000 National Guard troops. That most likely is the case. I do not doubt that. I can tell you definitively, I made 12 requests for federal support, including National Guard, both in advance and on January 6th while we're under attack, and was denied. It was only in the 13th request that I finally get approval at 2:09 p.m. on January 6th. So what I've come to learn since January 6th is January 6th was 100% preventable. If security on Capitol Hill hadn't been so politicized, and you know, when you hear Speaker Pelosi say she doesn't have a role in security on Capitol Hill, look at 2 U.S. Code 1970. Look at it before they changed it, because they changed it based on my testimony. It says specifically, I have to go to the Capitol Police Board. I'm the only chief of police in the United States of America that has to get permission to bring in support for my men and women.
So remember, different angles. From the Capitol Hill chief of police, he's concerned about security of the facility and the members of Congress and staff, right? So when he says the Capitol was under attack, from his perspective, it was under attack. Obviously, I would want to contend that, right? Like, hey, we weren't attacking, we were protesting.
Okay, sure.
Whatever. But the point is, he's looking at this going, hey, not only did I request extra help before, but I requested it during the event and was denied up until the 13th time that I made requests. So was it preventable? And he's just like, yes, it was preventable. And this comes back to that whole problem where it's like the people who actually are responsible rarely ever pay the price, but the patsies all down at the bottom do.
Went to the Capitol Police Board. They are required to then get concurrence. They have to go to congressional leadership. It's written in the law. Her responsibility is written in law. So when she said she doesn't play a role, she does. So when you look back on it, whether they had approved my request, and the current, the latest report from Congress said if Chief Son's request had been approved, the perimeter most likely would have never been breached. One. Two, intelligence. I've done major events in Washington, D.C. for many, many years. I've dealt with FBI. I've dealt with DHS. They'd put out joint intelligence bulletins. They'd have briefings. They'd have call the chiefs into the skiffs. They'd do a conference call. They'd make sure everyone has the same intelligence. Intelligence was handled differently, especially even within my own unit. If intelligence had been accurate, I would have gotten support from the Capitol Police Board. I would have gotten support from leadership. And again, January 6th wouldn't have happened. We had many of opportunities to get out of the front of this train.
I think, too, we've talked about, and you've discussed during.
This is Julie Kelly speaking, by the way. And again, the world being small, Julie Kelly and I have sat outside of my courtroom, right, and chit-chatted about January 6th and everything that's going on. And she's asked me about my family and how things are. So I know, I don't know her, but I know Julie Kelly. I have her contact info. She's a great person. And she was one of the few reporters that just stood by January 6ers and just reported exactly what she saw. She's made a big deal about my judge telling me I was going to go to prison before I ever had trial or jury or anything. Right? She was sitting in the courtroom when that happened. She was the only person there that was advocating for me through this January 6th thing into the public zeitgeist.
Congressional testimony and also just interviews. What are some of the things that you've learned over the past 4 years that you didn't know about that day? For example, not being alerted about the presence of the FBI informants. We talked about not getting access to intelligence, the presence of undercover agents from numerous law enforcement agencies that you weren't really privy to. So I guess, what have you learned? Like, what surprised you the most as these revelations have come forward, either congressional testimony, the trials, media reporting?
Well, two things that I think surprised me the most is, one, just how adverse some people up in Congress were to the truth coming out. People may not realize this. When they had the first hearing, February 23rd, 2021, think about that. It's only a couple of weeks after January 6th. They didn't want me to testify. I actually had to go and request through the Rules Committee that I be allowed to testify. I told them I will be there in person, I promise you. And sure enough, if you look at it, I'm the only one that showed up in person. Everyone else was videotaped in. The other aspect was, again, the domestic terrorists that people are saying, the FBI was tracking domestic terrorists. That, again, started the day after my testimony, February 24, 2001. Jill Sanborn testified and said that the FBI was tracking domestic terrorists coming to the January 6th committee. Now we know from GIO reports and various other reports that as of January 6th, they were tracking, I think, approximately 19 to 26 domestic terrorists coming to Washington, D.C. That sure as hell would have been something that I'd like to know about as a chief of police of a Capitol Police, that they were coming. And when they talk about tracking domestic terrorists, I mean, they're tracking them with people. They're not tracking them with like the janitorial crew. They're tracking them with people. So it's not unusual for undercovers to be in the crowd. You're talking about major events in Washington, D.C. It's probably SOP, but it would have been great to know that.
So a little bit your experience with the January 6th Select Committee. Who now, of course, all of the members and all of the staff were pardoned by Joe Biden. So no one can be held accountable for the destruction of evidence, tampering with witnesses, such as Cassidy Hutchinson, and other malfeasance that we know actually happened with that committee. So, but they didn't really want the truth from you either.
Yeah, I had a very interesting interaction with them. One, it became clear early on that their focus wasn't trying to get to what the American people want to know, what really happened on January 6th. Their focus was predetermined outcome. It was to focus on basically 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. How was Donald Trump responsible for this? I went in there. I had, you'd think the chief of police, they'd want me testifying in public. Absolutely not. When we had our interview, it got very contentious, where I repeatedly tried to refer them back to my responsibility to go through the Capitol Police Board to get assistance for my men and women, and how I did that in advance of January 6th. They wanted no part of that. They did not want you, the American people, to know that I had gone out of my way to try and bring in resources to protect the United States Capitol. And then it got, like I said, it got contentious. It was a 6-hour interview. You didn't see a word of that on TV. That was, I thought, was concerning. That made me realize real quick that they weren't looking for the truth. And then when
that's what made it hit for him. It wasn't kicking off the Republicans that the Republicans wanted on the committee.
Right.
It wasn't all the things that they said, their objectives of the committee. It was when your testimony was buried up and covered up. That's one of the common themes about what I find with like just everything dealing with the government. Everything's fine until the boot's on your neck, right? Until the soldiers are quartered in your house. It's not that big a deal. King and country, right? Until the boot of tyranny actually touches your doorstep, you don't really realize like how it can be. Like, this is the chief of police in the Capitol. You think he's part of the blob, right? That he's like read in on all the secrets. Probably not.
Well, most Americans are in his same camp. They're just believing that everything's working the way it's supposed to.
Believe that everything's working the way it's supposed to. Exactly. So one of the funny things I've mentioned is people popping up everywhere. So this right here. Okay, look at my screen here. So this is this kid in the background. His name is Brandon Fellows. Okay. So I was with Brandon Fellows in D.C. in the Gulag. He was like 2 doors, 3 doors down from me.
Dude, you know everybody.
I know. That's what I'm saying. The universe got a lot smaller in this little ecosystem, right? So this is Brandon Fellows. So he's from New York, upstate New York. He got arrested with the 1512 obstruction of Congress and then the slate of misdemeanors. He fought his case. This guy is hilarious. Like, this guy will be on our podcast certainly a couple times. So. Yeah, like I want to make him like our DC correspondent because he's currently living in DC. So we were in DC together, and the guidelines for his charges had him to the point where he was actually over serving the time. Okay. At one point, he represented himself. At one point, he got held in contempt of court for basically telling the court it was a kangaroo court, it was a Nazi court, and he wouldn't back down. So the judge is like, "Do you have anything to say before I sentence you to 5 months contempt of court?" And he goes, "Will you please put on the record that the Nazi court is sentencing me to 5 months in court for calling it a Nazi court," or something like that. Okay. This guy has no fear. And then when the 1512 was overturned, so currently, or not now because he's pardoned, but he was on probation, you can't have misdemeanors, jail time, and probation. You have to pick one or the other, the judges. They were giving people both, which is crazy. So he, with the 1512 going away, he was appealing. He was going to get his probation taken away, I'm sure. But anyways, Brandon's got a very unique chapter in the J6 thing. But this is like a week or two after he gets out of prison. Okay. He's on probation. He set his home address as the District of Columbia. So he's on probation in District of Columbia. So he gets to go hang around the Capitol and be kind of a troll. And he's just been popping up everywhere because he'll go to these congressional meetings, sat right behind Fauci's shoulder. So I come into the TV room in federal prison in Missouri. Okay. And Fauci's up on CNN testifying. And there's Brandon Fellows sitting over his shoulder making these faces.
Someone who clearly was on their way to kill me. And it's required my having protective services essentially all the time. It is very troublesome to me. It is much more troublesome because they've involved my wife and my 3 daughters.
Oh, he did this the whole hearing. Like,
how do you feel?
I didn't know you knew this dude, but I remember seeing this guy and go, man, this guy's trying to get arrested right here.
Well, he's back.
Oh, no.
So this is him hanging out yesterday. I don't know exactly where. Hanging out around CPAC or something. He's got an ICE immigration jacket on and a Make America Great Again hat. And this is some British journalist comes up to him.
Do you actually work for ICE?
No, not at all. Nope.
Explain the outfit.
It's $29.99 on Amazon. I would recommend buying a small if you're my size. This one's a little too loose for my liking. But yeah, if you want some entertainment, wear this and go to a Home Depot in a sanctuary city like where I live right now, Washington, D.C., and you see all the illegals, not all of them, but you can maybe see a lot of them start to run away, and you feel like a group fitness instructor. It's really good.
And you actually think that's funny?
I think it's hilarious. Absolutely.
Oh, my gosh.
What's not funny is them illegally.
There you have it, everybody.
There you have
One of the
it.
worst people I've seen here at CPAC, and that's saying something. Appreciate it.
One of the worst people I've seen here.
Dude. Troll 1000%.
Yes. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so January 6th, right? You think about the kind of a timeline narrative here, political power.
Right.
So this guy right here that's talking, David French, he's one of these like, not a log cabin Republican, what do they call them? Lincoln Republicans or whatever, Lincoln Project Republicans.
Okay.
So he's a anti-Trump, conservative, Trump's not conservative thing, which is true. I mean, there's some truth to that. Okay. And so this is kind of like the Liz Cheney wing of the Republican Party. And they've opposed Trump basically every step of the way. But he makes a critical observation, and this is kind of what I saw. And this is why sometimes I'm confused when people are like, we thought Trump was done on January 7th. It's like, well, I don't think Trump was done. I think that the blob struck hard, taking him off the internet, the whole January 6th event, everything. Like, yeah, his political capital's down, but I didn't see Trump's popularity going down necessarily. But the media, which David French is part of that ecosystem, they thought he'd be done. But he made an observation that keen observers all saw.
In to the point where, and I knew we were cooked, totally cooked as a conservative movement by January 7th, 2021, because I could see what everyone else sort of in professional politics could see, which was on January 7th, of the three big, most powerful Republicans in America at that point, between Mitch McConnell, Mike Pence, and Donald Trump, with Republicans, Mike Pence's approval plummeted, McConnell's approval plummeted, and Donald Trump stayed sky high with Republicans. And that taught me that the radicalization was essentially complete.
Yeah.
It was complete by that time and then fulfilled now.
The radicalization of the Republican Party had turned from conservative to Trumplican. That's what. Remember, they see through this lens of power, right? They got their voting base. Each party's got 50% of the country carved out. Throw some cheating in there, you can swing it up to 60. Okay. But they've figured out how to kind of split the country 50-50, Hegelian dialect, pick an issue, give me 20 minutes. I'll have you on one party side based on one issue. And then we'll just ignore all the other issues.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're want social liberty, okay, I'm going to steer you to the Hollywood party with the Democrats. If you want fiscal responsibility, I'll steer you to the Republican Party. Right. Ignoring the fact that you might actually be a hippie, but you want low taxes, so we'll make you vote Republican. Right. Even though you might align more with the Democrat Party on a lot of issues.
Right.
Like,
They do this all the time with abortion. They always try to flip-flop on abortion.
Flip the issues. Yeah. Split the baby. Okay. So he's looking at this and he's like, we're cooked.
Yeah.
Right. And that has played out. I just love it looking at like the retrospective when these people can say like, here's what we saw. The three most powerful conservatives, Republicans, and Trump stayed high. How do you re-wrangle a party when Trump gets all of the support?
Yeah.
And you've already done everything you can do to him.
Yeah.
Right.
They ran out of plays.
Yeah. I thought it was crazy. So I was in DC when the primaries were going on. So we were watching it like on Scripps News and stuff like that. It really blew me away that it blew me away that DeSantis and Ramaswamy didn't surprise me. He was trying to come in and play the outsider and actually take the Trump vote. But a lot of these guys came in and made a real play for it. Nikki Haley especially. I'm like, where did you guys get off thinking that you were going to be able to take down Donald Trump in a Republican primary? That really surprised me. I think a lot of Republicans knew they couldn't, but those candidates, for whatever reason, thought maybe they could rally moderate Democrats away from Biden or something. I'm not really sure. But good to know that they know it's dead and dying. And it's always good for us to remember things. So can we hit pause real quick?
Yep.
3, 2. All right, quickest break you've ever had. So when I was in prison, I wrote this essay called Remember. It's a short essay, and I think it's important for us to kind of understand how important it is for us as peasants, your normal everyday person without title, just the person taking care of himself, taking care of his family, right? The peasants in our most basic state in a social group. We are just fellow worker ants, okay? Engraved on the inside of my wedding band is the most powerful word of all, lembrice, which is Portuguese. My wife and I met in Brazil for remember. It is upon the word remember that all knowledge is based. It is remembering what brought pain or pleasure that directs the instinct of man. Remembering takes lessons of the past, applies them to the present, so that we can better choose our future. Those who seek control want to get you to forget. History repeats itself. To those who do not remember its lessons and patterns, those whose fruit is bitter, want you to forget the awful taste and take another bite. Remember why we fought for freedom, why we died for rights. Remember what price was paid for truth, and we will never go astray. If we forget, we must experience every pain again, every price paid twice or more, and truth will be forgotten. Remember who, what, when, where, and why, and the future can be smoother sailing. Government is built on consent. Do we remember what that means? Okay, so remember. We have to remember. It's super critical as peasants to remember. Otherwise, the bitter fruit that we taste from generation to generation, we'll taste it over and over and over again.
It'll be our fault.
We say we've moved past genocide, but yet here we are committing it. You know what I mean? We become the very thing we hate because we don't remember the lessons of history. So let's take a little trip back in time to what the media was trying to tell us about COVID. Remember.
The unvaccinated. You are the problem. It is the unvaccinated who are the problem. Period. End of story.
The only people that you can blame, this isn't shaming, this is the truth. Maybe they should be shamed, are the unvaccinated.
It's time to start blaming the unvaccinated folks, not the regular folks.
Anyone you came into contact with will blame you, as will the rest of us who have done the right thing by getting vaccinated.
Because frankly, we know that we can't trust the unvaccinated.
I think it's time to get our moral house in order, Anderson. It's the unvaccinated who are the threat.
All those vaccinated folks are going to start wearing masks to protect the unvaccinated folks. It's called a Christian value.
You're basically punishing the vaccinated for the sins of the unvaccinated.
People are not behaving honorably. The unvaccinated are basically saying, well, it's open season for me. I can do whatever I want as well.
The unvaccinated are basically beating their breasts, running around the country saying, we don't care, we're living free, and so forth.
We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin.
The unvaccinated, a group that includes children and people acting like children. And the rest of us are starting to get pissed off.
The vaccinated feel the unvaccinated are making me upset or angry.
This is not about freedom or personal choice.
It's not about freedom or personal choice. Get vaccinated. You're putting us at risk. You're the problem. Vaccine, vaccine, vaccine. Don't worry about the science. You know what I mean? I mean, this show was largely based and centered around COVID. It was COVID that really inspired me to finally do this show in the first place. They said those things. They did that. They implemented that. Inside of the Bureau of Prisons, what happened during COVID was a crime against humanity as far as like solitary confinement lockdowns BOP wide because of COVID. And then the nonsensical science like don't go outside. You know, like crazy stuff. Out here, can't go to stores. You know, tobacco store and weed stores wide open, but churches are closed. You know, think about conservative communities like Moscow, Idaho, or Grangeville, Idaho, one of the two cities up there, northern Idaho, where the church wanted to meet, and so they met in the parking lot, 6-foot separation, singing, and they came and got arrested.
Yeah, I remember that.
That split that city up. It really divided that city. Okay, COVID was a horrible thing. And yet every single day, more and more, us conspiracy theorists, the ones who said, hey, you know, we should probably question the people wanting to stab a needle in your arm.
Yeah. I remember when this first came, you know, and this is why I'm on the podcast too, was COVID. But also, I remember when it first came out, and I met somebody for lunch, and they go, well, have you got the jab? I'm like, no. And they're like, well, what are you doing about the masking? I'm like, I don't believe in that shit. And they're like, well, why? Is it because you're an engineer? And I was like, wink.
It's like,
Yeah.
Using a cloth mask to stop a virus is like stopping a mosquito with a chain link fence.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
And now I'm supposed to catch the wrath of the entire society and just get the jab anyways because it doesn't make any sense. Okay.
Yeah. Let alone this. So this is Liz Wheeler, and she's recapping a health report from Yale, as well as been backed up time and time again. Now, to those of us that have been long indoctrinated in the conspiracy theories around COVID, these are not new phrases to us. This is like, well, yeah, this is what we've been saying for 4 years.
Yeah.
Like, start your clock now. About this week, 4 years ago was when COVID made its first real appearance in the world.
Yeah.
Right. And here we are. It's like, oh, wow, we've been right for 4 years. Thanks for coming along. Well, thanks for maligning us. Thanks for lying to us. Thanks for calling us the bad guys.
And also on that, I have to add to my engineering background that kind of tipped me off. Also, one of my kids got freaking super sick, and it was a illness that we went to the doctor, and they were like, we don't know what this is, and this is pre-COVID, and it turns out, pretty sure
it was COVID.
Pretty sure it was, and so our family had kind of gone through it before all the gaslighting had even started.
Yeah,
and so it was like, this is all bullshit.
Yeah.
You know.
All right, so Liz Wheeler here.
Bombshell new study from Yale Medical School finds people suffering from long COVID are actually suffering from mRNA vaccine injury. As if that's bad enough, it's worse than that. These people are suffering from what's called vaccine-induced AIDS. It's called VAIDs. This is from Slay News. Leading scientists from the world-renowned Yale University have confirmed that COVID mRNA vaccines cause vaccine-acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, VAIDs. A bombshell study conducted by researchers at Yale University School of Medicine found that mRNA injections alter human biology to create long-term spike protein production that increases over time. The scientists warned that the COVID mRNA vaccines alter T-cell immunophenotypes, which triggers VAIDs. The study was led by Bornali Bhattacharya. So not only were we collectively forced to take an experimental vaccine or risk losing our jobs, we were lied to about it. It didn't stop you from contracting or transmitting the virus. It wasn't safe. It caused heart issues and blood clots, autoimmune disorders. We were censored when we questioned the madness. And now we find out that the mRNA jab causes VAIDs in many people. This is one of the most egregious scandals in American history. Kash Patel's first order of business at the
Kash Patel's going to be busy.
In our state, when people were told get it or lose your job, that they did come up with an exemption criteria that you could say, well, I have a religious exemption. And a bunch of people applied for those. They were all denied, every single one of them. Yeah. Nobody got an exemption.
Do you remember years ago we played a clip with the Washington State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Chris Reynolds, talking about how racism is baked into the Constitution?
Chris Rakedahl?
It was Chris Rakedahl, yes. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That blew a lot of people's minds, by the way. Of all the little clips we ever played, that was one I got a ton of feedback from. People were like, I can't believe you said that. I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello.
Do you want to hear some more of that? Move to our state.
Yeah. Do you know what time it is? I don't think you realize they're about to take you to prison for your opinions. All right. Like, it's coming. All right. So this is him again, the insanity. So that was COVID. Now, for our listeners, I really do believe I know for a fact, at least a couple of them that I'm aware of took the vaccine. That's fine. Listen, I don't want to go back and relitigate the past. You made your decisions, right?
I have family members that took the vaccine.
Whatever. I don't care.
Yeah.
Right. The bigger theme here, though, is this idea of like trusting the government and who are the experts and, the tell-lie vision. Like, clearly you're watching tell-lie vision during COVID and they're tell-lying you that, the unvaccinated are the ones putting the vaccinated at risk. Well, now we're looking at it. It's like, well, the vaccinated might have VAIDs. I don't know about this. Like, I don't feel like that was on the inside cover of the injection that they handed me. This is like, guys, this is life or death. This is life or death. And that's like, this is why our founding fathers were so adamant about diffusing power. You don't want to concentrate power in the hands of people that will look at you and tell you, yes, please just take the vaccine we created 7 seconds ago.
Right.
That's designed to do bad things.
I don't know if this was a national thing or if it was just in our state. And I don't know if this is the right time for this comment, but do you remember in our state when they're like, oh, well, if you want to have sexual relations, all you got to do is get a shower curtain, poke a hole in it.
Yeah.
It's like
going that far, like the state health department was making statements on how to have group sex. Yeah, it was like, I don't feel
the dumbest thing
I feel
ever.
like we're shooting past the mark here.
It's like if you want to kiss somebody, all you got to do is kiss them through the hole in your mask.
Devastating things happen, man. People couldn't bury family members, couldn't visit newborn babies.
Yeah.
Like
for real.
The toll, the going backwards in public education, like these are huge things. This is not something that we should forget. We should remember. Because that script they did in COVID, what it was so outlandish that it was kind of like an engineer, a scientist, a doctor could kind of just flip through the precursory information and go, this is crap.
Yeah.
Right? It didn't take a PhD to say, this isn't right. It wasn't wrong on nuance. I mean, it was wrong.
But what could you say at the time because the gaslighting was so thick?
They were selling us a Dr. Seuss narrative. A pangolin and a bat met on a highway in China. You know what I mean? It's like,
do you like my hat?
Do you like my hat?
Like your hat?
I do not like your pangolin hat bat. But let's make a virus. Okay, so I'm playing this little clip here, not because I want to go into this field here, talking about transgenderism and stuff like that, but just to show you that the gaslighting, right? Don't believe what you know. Believe something else.
Okay.
We have a civil rights framework in this state. It includes trans youth.
Okay. The state's been around for 100 and something years. I'm pretty sure in 18 whatever, they weren't thinking, hey, we got to include the trans in our Washington state constitution. I don't feel like that really worked out that way.
We have a civil rights framework in this state. It includes trans youth. This is a biological question. It is quite simply inaccurate to say biologically that there are only boys and there are only girls. There's a continuum. There is a science to this. There are children who are born intersex. There are children whose chromosomes and their hormones aren't consistent with their sex at birth. That's not a debate we're going to have today. I just want to remind you of our civil rights obligation. Our state laws make clear that students get to identify and participate in activities based on the gender in which they identify. We're going to uphold that law. We have a civil rights framework.
Okay.
Anybody still want to move to Washington?
This state is great. The only
I know,
thing wrong with
but
Washington
dude.
are the communists who run it.
Yeah.
Okay? But again, listen, I want to have an honest debate here. There's people that have chosen to be of the lifestyle of trans, one thing or another, you know, whatever. Let's talk about it. Here's the deal. You're not talking about biology. You're talking about psychology.
Right.
Okay. Listen, whatever. You want to go through the effort of dressing up like a girl and walk around like a girl, and you're going to do it day after day for years and months. I'll call you she. I don't care. It's just not a hill I'm going to die on. We all know, as long as you know that I know, you know what I mean? And you make your accommodations for the bathroom or whatever privacy needs. You do you, boo. I don't care. But to tell me that it's in the framework of the Washington State Constitution, trans
bullshit.
rights,
No.
and to tell me that it's not a matter of choice, it's biology, but it is a spectrum, and you personally identify. No, that's a binary one or the other.
You're trying to tell me that when I look in my underpants, I got to gaslight myself?
The exception of like the chromosomes and things, you're talking like the 1 in a million. Okay, you deal with those one-offs.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
You can deal with them one-off.
You deal with them one-off. Yeah. You don't deal with them by gaslighting me about the Washington State Constitution. Yeah. Again, be wary of these people. This is a slow burning scam, right? COVID was a fast burning scam. This is a slow burning scam. Same thing goes with the climate change. It's a slow burn scam, right? If you just sacrifice all of your rights for the sake of the transgenders, to me, that's akin to like if we just put all the virgins in the volcano, it won't go off. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, man.
What year was it that Al Gore came out and said sea rise was gonna like cripple us? What year was that? I can't remember.
I don't know.
It was only supposed to be 10 years before Florida disappeared, whenever it was.
Yeah. Okay. So this is Tulsi Gabbard, who's been confirmed as the director of national intelligence. I got to say, I've been really impressed by Donald Trump getting all of his cabinet members in there. Really impressed. In fact, there's a Pakistani Al-Qaeda member back in Missouri. He owes me a big bet because they got Hegseth across the line. And he was certain they wouldn't. So, if I was back in prison, he'd be paying up. Okay, so this is Tulsi Gabbard talking about how our rights get taken and our privacy gets violated and how we have to guard against that and question if these tools should even exist.
For too long, as you know, we've seen people in positions of great power tell us that, oh, well, if we just violate your civil liberties and freedom a little bit, it's okay because we're trying to keep you safe. Unfortunately, we've seen this for decades, and the more our freedoms are eroded, the more the foundations of our democracy are eroded. So, a lot of people talk about national security or security threats, but there's two components of that leaders have to really uphold, which is, yes, there's such a thing as a threat to physical security, but the threat to our freedom and our liberty must be balanced right alongside that threat to our physical security. For too long,
I came to the realization that so many things in life are really come down to like an ultimate kind of binary question, right? And so when you're dealing with anything political, it's going to come down to the individual or the collective. Okay. So if someone's trying to invade your space and they're trying to take your rights, your freedom, your land, your whatever, your right, your ability to live and pursue what you define as happiness, right? They're trying to take your security, your freedom, right, by force. So then when we collectivize and then we give all of our freedom and security to the collective, we've ultimately done the same thing. You see what I'm saying? Like, well, I don't know. Maybe the guy with the sword will have a better government than the people we empower to do it. They might be just as oppressive. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, right or left, doesn't matter if it's a foreign invader or local invader, boots on my neck. She's saying, hey, you have to balance these powers, because once you give someone else the power over your freedom, your security, your privacy, right, it's just as likely to get used against you as your quote unquote enemies. So I really appreciate, like, these people are coming into power. They're saying the right words. Let's see what they do. Up till now, I've been impressed, but we're only a month in. Right now, we're just kind of setting the stage, but we are also seeing real cuts. We're seeing actually employees complaining about being fired. You know what I mean? Like, that's really good. But then on the other side, on the House, they're basically going to put through a funding bill that's going to fund all the stuff that they're allegedly cutting.
Yeah.
So we'll see. This is a government employee, and she's a newer government employee, which is, they're great because they're the ones that come in and they, have this rosy idea of what it's supposed to be, and then they see all the problems. So this is perfect timing for her to have Doge happening and for her to kind of come out publicly as a little bit of a whistleblower. And what she's saying is, you'll notice, because I know we have some government employees that listen, nothing revolutionary, right? We all know you're wasting our time and our tax money, right? It's cleanup time.
I used to be a federal employee, and I'm going to tell you why I don't feel bad for federal employees being forced to come back into the workplace. I worked for the Army Corps of Engineers for almost a year.
By the way, going back with the whole COVID thing, I saw a little meme that was like, don't go to work, put your mask on, all this other stuff, work from home, you're non-essential. And these government employees are working from home getting paid. And then it's like, now that they have to go to work, they're like, no, like if you don't go to work, you'll lose your job. And it's like, if you go to work, you'll lose your job. And now it's, if you don't go to work, you'll lose your job. And they're like, like they live in such an upside down world.
And the abuses that I saw by government employees was astounding and shocking. I worked as a realty specialist, and that is someone who manages government-owned lands. So when farmers and ranchers lease land to graze cattle, we would manage that. When I was hired, my boss bragged that it was basically impossible to get fired from the federal government, and that in her entire time working for the government, she'd only seen one person fired. And that person assaulted a fellow employee, and she wasn't even fired for assaulting the employee at work. She was fired for lying about it because they caught it on camera.
Dope.
when I worked for the government, we were allowed to work 50% in the office and 50% from home for the most part. In some cases, if you'd worked there, like I think over 10 years or something, you could actually work from home 3 days a week and work from the office 2 days a week. I use the word work very loosely. One employee spent his time remote working, running his own farm. Another employee bragged about drunk driving and going out to lunch with her friends for margaritas when she was supposed to be remote working. No one would log into their computers, and you can see it because they're not on Teams, and no one ever checked. Ever.
Shocker.
There's something called the 80-20 rule, where 80% of the work in government is done by 20% of the people, and this is very, very true. People who get a job in the government a lot of times find out that it's very difficult to fire them, and they take advantage of this. One employee would come into the office, his start time would be 6:30, and he knew nobody would be there. And when I came in at 7:30 and I was the next person to come in, he was snoring at his desk every single morning.
Nap time.
Another employee would take the government truck on an almost daily basis so that he could go out to lunch and then go and take a nap in his favorite park under a shady tree in the government truck.
She just kind of goes on and on.
I got a story I got to tell you.
Okay.
So I was thinking of all the stories that I could and couldn't share because, people know who I am. And there's this one story that I can share this. So this is a government employee. He told me at the time, so one of his workmates would check out a truck from the local base, and he would drive to a different local base so that this is every day, so that he could get a Coke out of the machine at the other base because it was only a dime. So he would requisition a truck, drive it like 10 miles, get a Coke, and then drive back for what?
For a dime Coke.
For a dime Coke. It was like, okay.
Anybody who's worked around anybody in government, you got tons of these stories.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the waste, fraud, abuse. And the thing is government workers become, and I've just adopted this phrase, they become numb.
Yeah.
They become numb to it, become numb to the waste, fraud, and abuse. It becomes so normalized they don't realize what they're doing.
Well, when I heard
participating
the story,
in behavior that oftentimes on the private sector would result in criminal or civil charges.
Correct. And at the time when people share these kind of stories, it was almost like gamesmanship. We're like, who can tell the best story of waste, fraud, and abuse, and who was getting away with the most ridiculous kind of it.
Yeah. But now we have a new sheriff in town. So this is Stephen Miller, the deputy chief of staff. And he is the architect on like the immigration plans, and he's a real think tank guy behind the MAGA movement. And he's talking about cleaning out the federal bureaucracy.
A federal bureaucrat who defies the lawful orders of this president will be fired. President Trump will ensure that whether you work at the FBI, whether you work at the CIA, whether you work at the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, the Department of Health and Human Services, career civil servants, also known as bureaucrats, work for the American people, and they work for the president the American people elected. They do not set their own agenda. They do not write their own rules. They do not work for themselves. They work for each and every one of you. You pay their salaries. You pay for the buildings they work in. You pay for every single thing they do. And if they are not following the laws, the Constitution, and the President of the United States, then they will find a new career.
I love
Federal bureaucrat.
That has been the big problem, right? the deep state, the administrative state, the blob, they just slow roll things. Hey, we only got to wait 4 years. New administration, new rules, right? But right now you got government employees walking around acting like this. This is a clip from The Office.
Pleasure's all mine.
No, thanks. I'm really looking forward to sitting down with you and finding out more about what you do here.
Anytime.
Yeah. What do you do here?
Excuse me. What is wrong with this woman? She's asking about stuff that's nobody's business. What do I do? Really, what do I do here? I should have written it down. Qua something. Quabity Ashwitz.
Ashwitz. You have federal employees wandering around. What do you do here? So this weekend, they wanted all government employees to write an email back to the supervisor saying the 5 things they accomplished in this last week.
Right.
It was, people were screaming and they're like, this is basic.
I know there's a lot of people making a lot of noise about this, but I think this is one of those things where they just want you to respond because they want to clear out the ones that don't respond at all.
Don't respond first. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Stephen Miller, this administration is so different from the Biden administration, right? This is like an aggressive press department, like communications department. And then it's not aggressive with like gaslighting narrative that we all know they're lying to us. Like, here's your prov to line, here's your propaganda. These guys, I'm sure there's elements of propaganda and stuff like that. No doubt about it, right?
Sure.
Politics gonna politics.
It's all framing.
But at the same time, these guys are so much more aggressive about, rhetoric proof, like trying to line everything up. And
well, it's also why we're doing this podcast. It's not like we're Trump Kool-Aid people. We're watching these guys too.
Yeah. Yes. Because the weapons they create can be used against us.
Yep.
All right.
Room for 4 years failed to cover the fact that Joe Biden,
he's in the White House press briefing room, scory eating the press. I love
was mentally incompetent and was not running the country. It is also true that many people in this room who have used this talking point that Elon is not elected fail to understand how government works. So I'm glad for the opportunity for a brief civics lesson. A president is elected by the whole American people. He's the only official in the entire government that is elected by the entire nation, right? Judges are appointed, members of Congress are elected at the district or state level, which is one man. And the Constitution, Article 2, has a clause known as the vesting clause, and it says the executive power shall be vested in a president, singular. The whole will of democracy is imbued into the elected president. That president then appoints staff to then impose that democratic will onto the government. The threat to democracy, indeed the existential threat to democracy, is the unelected bureaucracy of lifetime tenured civil servants who believe they answer to no one, who believe they can do whatever they want without consequence, who believe they can set their own agenda no matter what Americans vote for. So Americans vote for radical FBI reform, and FBI agents say they don't want to change. Or Americans vote for radical reform on our energy policies, but EPA bureaucrats say they don't want to change. Or Americans vote to end DEI, racist DEI policies, and lawyers at the Department of Justice say they don't want to change. What President Trump is doing is he is removing federal bureaucrats who are defying democracy by failing to implement his lawful orders, which are the will of the whole American people.
It's so simple.
It really is.
It's so simple that only the Tea Party can get it. It's amazing. With a little bit of civics education, anybody who's like, well, he's not elected. Well, no one in the executive branch is elected except for the president, and we elect him to deal with those people. I love it. This is Donald Trump again, unitary executive. Right. The executive branch, all of it serves at the pleasure of the president, who serves at the pleasure of the people. So here's Donald Trump again. They're going through this methodically going through the government, and they're hacking. They made Kash Patel, who got confirmed as FBI director. He's now the director of the ATF. So functionally right now in chain of command, the ATF and the FBI have now merged.
Oh.
Wow.
Whoa.
That's cool. I don't really see a function that the ATF serves that the FBI doesn't use. In fact, it's my understanding that the ATF is constantly lending its law enforcement charter to the FBI. You know, if it touches a gun, they use the ATF's charter to do the law enforcement. Because I don't know if you knew this or not, but the FBI doesn't have a law enforcement charter.
Oh.
Yeah. So like ATF has a law enforcement charter. Everybody's got a law enforcement charter. When the FBI shows up in any jurisdiction, they need to borrow an office and a laptop, and they share the police department or the sheriff's department or the ATF or the DEA's law enforcement charter. They're like, yeah, they're supposed to be the investigative arm of the attorneys, the Department of Justice. But there's a whole like backstory scandal as to why they don't have a charter and why the Senate denied them one and why they're like, you know, the most powerful law enforcement agency that wasn't. Okay, so here's Donald Trump hacking away the post office.
There are reports that you are considering merging the United States Postal Service with the Commerce Department. Can you elaborate on this and something you're
Well,
considering?
we want to have a post office that works well and doesn't lose massive amounts of money. And we're thinking about doing that, and it'll be a form of a merger, but it'll remain the Postal Service, and I think it'll operate a lot better than it has been over the years. It's been just a tremendous loser for this country, tremendous amounts of money being lost, and we think we can do something that'll be very good and keep it a very similar way, but whether it's a merger or just using some of the very talented people that we have elsewhere so it doesn't lose so much. It's losing a tremendous amount of money.
Okay. So constitutionally, you have the post office, right? And then corporation-wise, you have the United States Postal Service. So I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but you go to any post office, there's two signs. There's the United States Postal Office, and there's the United States Postal Service. The Postal Office is a constitutional thing, right? The Postal Office has all of their labels inside of the post office are in red. The United States Postal Service, all their labels inside are in green. There's registered mail, there's certified mail. Post office is registered. Postal Service is certified. There's actually two things going on when you go into the post office.
You're blowing a lot of people's minds right now.
Yeah, there's two things going on. So the United States Postal Office has a contract with the government entity known as the United States Postal Service to actually do the nitty-gritty work, right? So the Postal Office has to guarantee a handful of things to the people, and then the Postal Service is contracted to provide those services and more. Right. So what he's talking about is essentially eliminating the United States Postal Service and bringing in any other. You could have FedEx delivering mail for the post office.
Yeah.
You know, then 2 years later, you could have a new contract with UPS or DHL or whatever.
Well, it's also why you have Postal Service guys delivering Amazon packages basically right now.
Yeah.
Because it's just a contract.
It's a contract.
Yeah.
So he's talking about merging it. What's great about this is, again, the Postal Service has been losing money. It's been underperforming, right? So rather than treat it like any other government agency that you just can't get rid of, it's like, no, let's reform it and make it work. Clearly, FedEx has figured out how to deliver packages for profit.
Yeah,
you know,
Amazon has.
Why can't the U.S. government?
Yeah.
If it's going to run like a business, run like a business, darn it. Kick off a dividend to the American taxpayer.
Yeah.
Why not? Another big thing that Donald Trump did this week, and this one really hits close to home for me, is he announced Alice Johnson will be the pardon czar.
Alice Johnson, where's Alice? Boy, are you incredible. I watched you on last night on television. You were so good. You know, Alice was in prison for doing something that today probably wouldn't even be prosecuted. She spent 22 years in prison, 22 years. She had another 22 years left. Can you believe it? And I pardoned her, and it was one of the best pardons. One of the best pardons. You know what she was on? She happened to be on the wrong telephone line. Is that true? She was on a telephone call. And I'm not saying it was perfect, but it wasn't worth 40 or 50 years, Alice. And you've been an inspiration to people. And we're going to be listening to your recommendation on pardons. You're going to go over and she's going to be my pardon czar. Okay. And you're going to find people just like you that should not have happened. It should not have happened. So you're going to look and you're going to make recommendations, and I'll follow those recommendations.
So 22 years in federal prison. That's a long time. And she was basically convicted on a drug conspiracy.
What do you know about any of that?
Yeah. I think it's great.
Yeah.
I really think that the pardon power, the commutation power is an underused power. And, you know, I understand the will of the people, jury, but when you get out into the nitty gritty details of sentencing commission and guidelines and points and good time versus hard time, and I mean, it's just
all the stuff that jurors don't even have any clue about.
Yeah. Honestly, when you've got these really long sentences, 15, 20, 25, 30 years, once you hit past that 10-year mark, I think they should bring back federal parole boards or something. There should be a way for a person to rehabilitate themselves and not get lost in these in their sentences. I can think of one person off the top of my head that absolutely would merit a commutation or a pardon. Shouldn't be in there. It's part of a drug conspiracy. The leader of the drug conspiracy got 15 years. This guy, because of a handful of more incidental things as far as, you know, him being afraid of going to prison and running and he got like a 27-year sentence. And it's like he's the most minor person a part of this drug conspiracy, but he got the death sentence basically. You know, and he's another example of someone who would absolutely deserve a commutation or pardon. He's been down, I think, 12 years at this point.
Oh boy.
Trust me, he's not going to be receiving any drug packages anytime soon. All right. So Kash Patel's in, and now Dan Bongino's in at the FBI.
That's wild.
When I saw that Dan Bongino was being appointed as the deputy director of the FBI, I was like, they're gonna do it. They are going to just go scorched earth inside of those agencies while simultaneously trying to right the ship. Like at the end of this, we're still going to have an FBI, right? But it's probably not going to have a lot of the same political actors in it as there was. And you got to realize the corruption at the FBI goes really, really deep. So the FBI came out to my house this week to drop off my property. And they had a discussion with my wife, and I guess one of the new FBI agents said something kind of in passing during their discussion that was like, well, you know, with January 6th, they did go to like overthrow the government and like stop the peaceful transfer of power. I'm like, bro, the Kool-Aid stain is still on your upper lip. Like, you don't know what's going on here. You don't understand why we got pardoned. You don't understand anything. This FBI agent, the other one, the main one, was like feigning, in my opinion, you know, sympathy because, you know, even though I was guilty and all this stuff, when he saw the sentence 7 years, oh, that's too much. And I'm like, your prosecution was asking for 9. You know, he maxed my guidelines out at 7 years, 3 months. I'm like, what do you mean it was, that's when it got too far. You guys are nuts. You know what I mean? Someone was saying that FBI agents inside of this was a post by some insider allegedly, but it's, you know, seemed too good to check. Don't need an original source for this one. But it said that inside of the FBI, they're all panicking and they're reassuring themselves like, well, we were just following orders when we were doing these various prosecutions that, you know, everybody's scrutinizing. And then someone reminded them, well, yeah, but we used illegal techniques to get the warrants in the first place for the paperwork that you said, you know, we had all of our paperwork. Yeah, but the paperwork is illegally gathered. And you kind of were aware of that. It's like, oh, you have to be pretty silly to think that Donald Trump was really a Russian asset. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so and you have to be pretty silly to think that the praying grandma was trying to overthrow the peaceful transfer of power. So, you know, I hope they really clean these places out root and branch. So this is Kash Patel. This is last summer talking about what would happen when Trump's team took over.
I mean, this is so unprecedented. It's just amazing.
This is about Alvin Bragg. So keep in mind, Pam Bondi's on this panel. She's now the Attorney General. Kash Patel's now the FBI Director. Bongino, who's not in here, but he's now the Deputy Director of the FBI. These guys are the ones in charge of actually going after the weaponization of government, holding people accountable. And this FBI Director is now going to talk about what his plans are to deal with Alvin Bragg up in New York.
I would say that.
It's shockingly unconstitutional, Trace. It's great to be with you. And I'm here to announce on your show a measure that I'm working with Congress that should be Congress's bread and butter. And I'm calling for the subpoenas to be issued to Judge Merchant's daughter's company, who made $15+ million from the illicit information pouring out of her father's courtroom. I want to know the bank records, because money doesn't lie. I want to know how deep it is and how much of it went to the family and how much of it is going to the family after this false conviction. And then we need to investigate the FEC actual violations that this judge and his family conducted, because he should never have been overseeing this trial to begin with, because of the illicit campaign money that was flowing through there. And the unconstitutional due process violations are only the beginning. So America is calling for accountability of our judicial system, and Congress is the only lever that has it. And I'm hoping for one or two brave members of Congress that I'm talking to issue those subpoenas ASAP.
Okay, so that was back when last summer, before the election, right, when he's just working with Congress. It's the only lever you've got, the Republican side. But that guy's now running the FBI. Imagine if you're Alvin Bragg. You know what I mean? Like, I just think it's awesome. And again, here's Donald Trump in another moment, right? One of the bills he signed was to get rid of trans boys playing in women's sports, right? Dealing with transgender sports. So the NCAA has immediately complied. So he's doing this press briefing. And again, this is at the White House. And this press briefing had a whole bunch of really good little clips, but this is one of them. And he smacks down the governor of Maine because she says she's not going to comply with the executive order. And listen to his attitude right now in running the country, right? This is not someone who's super concerned about all the little political nuances back and forth.
The NCAA has complied immediately, by the way. That's good. But I understand Maine. Is Maine here, the governor of Maine? Are you not going to comply with it? Well, we are the federal law. Well, you better do it. You better do it, because you're not going to get any federal funding at all if you don't. And by the way, your population, even though it's somewhat liberal, although I did very well there, your population doesn't want men playing in women's sports. So you better comply, because otherwise you're not getting any federal funding. Every state, good. I'll see you in court. I look forward to that. That should be a real easy one. And enjoy your life after governor, because I don't think you'll be in elected politics.
He's just coming after it, man. I love it. Well, we'll see you in court. We're following state law. Well, we're federal law. You got to comply with federal law. Well, we're going to see you in court. Okay, we'll see you there. Oh, and by the way, during all of this, let's see what Pam Bondi's got going on.
Scaring bad guys is something Cash has talked about a lot, and you have when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein and the people who are like predators in this country. They've been given a pass, and a lot of Americans think these guys have got a pass for a long time, and maybe even are still being protected right now. Where are we at with the Jeffrey Epstein list, the documents? And Cash has made a lot of public statements about this. Where are we at?
I was briefed on that yesterday. I can't talk about that publicly. But, you know, President Trump has given a very strong directive, and that's going to be followed.
Wow. Okay. So
a lot of documents.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So people can expect actual movement on this. It's not just empty promises.
Oh, Donald Trump doesn't make empty promises.
Yeah, right.
I think promises made, promises kept, and that's why we're all there to carry out his directive about making America safe and prosperous.
So it sounds like we're getting that Epstein list.
Wow.
Things are getting hot. As I'm watching this, and I'm just trying to, read the tea leaves, and I'm like, yep, the Democrat Party looks like they're getting pushed around. It really does look that way. And I'm not, listen, these guys play for keeps. Like, they're down a couple points coming into halftime. Like, this game just keeps getting played. But they really are at that, like, they're fractured. And there's desperation, because it's just like what Maxine Waters said. We don't know what they have on us. Right. They're losing. They lost X. Imagine what was done on direct messages and through X groups, Twitter groups and things like that. My understanding, it was a cesspool of issues, because they thought they had Twitter on lockdown. And now Elon's got all that data. I mean, he just has it.
He's got all the receipts.
He's got all the receipts, right? And you can't underestimate the power that comes from just simply, hey, I know where you've been with that cell phone, because I was going to have your geolocation data for as long as you've had a Twitter account, which for some of these politicians is going to be 20 years or something like that, right? I mean, this is an incredible amount of information and power. And then now on top of that, same guy, same group, total opposing force here is now not just running government, but like diving down into government, deep into the bowels to figure out where the resistors are and the obstruction and the waste, the fraud, the abuse. This is incredible to watch. And the only way that I can see a scenario where the only resistance the Democrats can really do is go stand out in front of the USAID building or go stand out in front of the FBI building and, please don't fire these loyal, great bureaucrats, right? It's like these people are blackmailed. Like it's like the reverse blackmail thing. It's like they can't scream too loud because then they draw attention to themselves. And, you know, some of the bigger players that have been around a while have probably been caught up. Let's just say not Epstein, but someone else like that or some other type of financial honeypot. I was seeing a little thing about Tom Cotton and how he's getting money through the USAID thing. And it's like, oh yeah, see, this goes every direction. You're going to find it all over the place. And there's going to be some people that are kind of innocently just on the dole that don't necessarily know the source. They're just, oh yeah, I'm on that board and this board and this board and whatever, right? They're going to have to condemn it if it's bad sources of funding or justify its existence, whatever it is. Like they can politically navigate this stuff. But on a whole, it makes me really wonder, like, okay, if USAID is gone, if the Department of Education drops a lot of its funding, if DOD cleans up, like what is the landscape going to look like in a year?
I don't know.
You know what I mean? Like
might be pretty odd
because we're kind of slowly entering a space where the television doesn't have the influence. They can't narrative cast. You're entering a space where the allegations that we've made that a lot of these really nefarious leftist groups are like funded by dark money, or like clearly they're not funded by the majority of people and their energy. They're funded by some dark source. You know what I mean? Like how can you get behind this weird movement? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Like clearly dark money. If that's all coming through these USA, like what's it gonna look like?
I don't know, because I have a feeling that it doesn't matter what party you're attached to, that a lot of these people have, you know, somehow slipped onto this teat that is just too good of money. And I think we're going to find a lot of weirdness everywhere. You know, I'm not a Republican Kool-Aid drinker either. And I don't know what this is going to look like, but I don't think we're going to get back down to like 2% tax.
No, I don't know. We'll see.
Okay.
All right, guys, that's pretty much it for our show today. We appreciate you coming out and joining us, and we will talk to you again tomorrow. Oh, hey, I'm supposed to... I just got it. We should be like a real show, you know. Oh yeah, you can find me at on X at Gone4Months. That's Gone the number 4 months, or the show's page at Peasants Per. That's PER. And you can check out our website at peasantsperspective.com. Still has a lot of the writings I did from prison up there, as well as a link to the old January 6th podcast episode we did a couple years ago. And you can always support my wife's nonprofit, leftbehindandwithout.org, that supports and helps kids with incarcerated parents, which is a ever needful thing. And with that, we'll sign off and talk to you again tomorrow.